Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. In our first story, bad people really upset our OP's grandmother, and he had to take matters into his own hands to teach these jerks a lesson. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Want to harass my grandmother? Enjoy paying for your box of ashes. So about 5 years ago, there was a wildfire in my area. It was pretty devastating, and almost everyone in my community lost their homes, including my grandmother. She'd lost her husband of almost 40 years earlier in the year, and now her home that he built was burned to the ground. My family and I had just had our house built, and the lack of grass from the foundation saved everything except for our wooden porch, so she came to live with us when it was deemed safe to return. She called to have all her TV and phone services canceled about a week after the fires and ended up getting choked up on the phone. She was an emotional mess, but she's a strong person and managed to handle the call. About a week after the call, she receives a letter demanding that she mail the TV equipment in or she'd be charged for a replacement for all of it. She called and explained that the equipment was gone, that it had burned along with her home. I could hear the CSR getting substantially louder while explaining again that it all needed to be mailed back. Once again, my grandmother's getting frustrated and emotional, and the CSR is getting louder and ruder. They called twice more over the span of a week. I answered the phone and asked them to send me the box and mailing labels as we'd not be paying for shipping, and the lady agreed. So what did I do? When I received the box, I scooped up ashes and bits of burned wires from my grandmother's home site, boxed it up, and shipped it to them on their dime. Then I called and filed a complaint about the calls placed to my grandmother, which I was assured would be followed up with, and never heard from them again. I do feel bad for whoever had to open it, but it seemed appropriate at the time and got the point across. And our next story. Seriously, lady, I'm a cop. I'm 26 years old and I'm a police officer who normally works the night shift, 1800 to 0600 hours. On this particular day, I was in a training class that was scheduled from 8 o'clock to 1700. Standard uniform attire for classes are the blue polo shirt with department logo on the chest and khaki pants. I had my service weapon and badge on the right side of my hip and my handcuffs, extra magazine, and radio on the left side of my hip. After the class ended, I went to my local supermarket, known for low prices and blue shirt, to get some things for dinner. While I'm there, a little kid who looked around 9 or 10 years old walks up to me. Little kid asks, "Are you a police officer?" while pointing to my service weapon. Me. "Yes, I am." "LK, I want to be a police officer when I grow up." He says that with much excitement. When I'm in uniform, I always carry around little plastic badges for when I run into kids. So I stood there for a few minutes talking to the kid while his mother was shopping in the aisle. When they go to leave, I give the kid the plastic badge and say, "Here you go, little buddy. You're now a junior officer." He smiled big and gave me a hug. He was so excited and started saying in his sing-song tune, "I'm a cop, I'm a cop, I'm gonna get all the bad guys." Kid and mom walk off and I go back to my shopping. I kneel down to look at some chips I'm thinking of getting when I hear someone clear their throat. I turn and see a lady, Karen, who looks to be in her early to mid-40s. The lady glares at me and I go back to looking at the chips. Karen, "Excuse me, are you going to help me or not? I need to know where the..." I cut her off and say, "Ma'am, I don't work here. You'll have to find an employee." Karen, "Don't lie to me. You're dressed like an employee. You obviously work here." Now, keep in mind, I'm not wearing the yellow vest most employees wear. I'm just wearing a blue polo shirt and khakis. I stand up and turn to her, showing my department logo on my shirt and pointing to my badge. Me, "Ma'am, I don't work here. I'm an off-duty officer." I don't understand what went through her mind when she said, "Stop lying. And why do you have a gun? You're not supposed to have a gun while working. Where's your manager?" I sighed. I've dealt with many Karens on duty, and I knew where this was going. Me, "Ma'am, I don't work here. My supervisor is Sergeant Dan, not his real name, with department. I do not work for the store. At this point, Karen looks mad and is staring at me like I'm lying to her. Karen then yells, "You lying little crap! I swear all people your age are just lazy and never want to help anyone. I want your manager now!" I again inform her that I don't work for the business. I even pull out my credentials, which is a photo identification card of me in uniform with the department name and logo, and has officer under my photo. It should also be noted that I keep my driver's license and debit card in my credentials since I have to have them on me at all times when I'm in public. Just makes it easier to keep everything together. Karen snatches my credentials out of my hand and stuffs them into her purse and says, "These are fake. I'm taking these and showing them to your manager and the real police." Ma'am, you've just committed simple robbery, which in my state is the taking of anything of value which is in the immediate control of another with force but not armed with a dangerous weapon. This crime's a felony and is punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Return my credentials now, or I'll be forced to place you under arrest. Karen, you can't arrest me because you're not a cop. I remove my radio from my hip and inform the dispatcher that I need units to my location for a Signal 65, simple robbery. Dispatcher acknowledges, and I hear 3 units state they were en route. I place my radio back on my hip and tell Karen that she's now being placed under arrest. As I go to grab her left wrist, she slaps me with her right hand, saying, "Don't touch me! Help! I'm being attacked!" I yell at her, "You have now committed battery on a police officer. Stop resisting or you'll go to the ground." I notice people are now forming, wondering what was going on. I hear on the radio that the units are on scene or asking for my location. I press the radio button and give them my aisle. A few moments later, 3 fully uniformed officers show up, Officer 1, 2, and 3. Officer 1 asks me what happened. I give him the rundown while Karen is spewing all sorts of lies of how I threatened her with my gun and how I'd attacked her to Officer 2. Officer 1 and 2 stay with us while Officer 3 goes to the security office to play back the cameras. While waiting on Officer 3, I'm chit-chatting with the other 2 officers. I went through the police academy with one of them. We hear Officer 3 saying over the radio to the other 2 officers to 10-15 Karen, which means place her in handcuffs and arrest her. The 2 officers do so. And they're placing her in handcuffs and reading her Miranda rights. She starts struggling and saying that she's innocent and that they should be arresting me for pretending to be a cop and attacking her and yada yada yada. Officer 1, "Lady, we have you on video. You've been lying to us this whole time. You're under arrest for simple robbery, battery on a police officer, disturbing the peace, and now resisting arrest." Officer 2, "Officer 2, you have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you use it." Officer 3 walks up to us with a copy of the camera footage, and all 3 walk Karen to the back seat of Officer 1's car. I spend the next few minutes explaining to the sergeant on duty, who showed up, about what happened, filling out a statement of the incident and having photographs taken. The photographs are standard procedure whenever we arrest someone for battery on a police officer. Once everything was said and done, my credentials are returned to me, Karen is taken to jail, and I go home. I'm never stopping at that business again when I'm wearing my training class uniform. And for those who might want to know about her charges and how much time she can face in jail or prison, I'll put the list below. I'll add if it's a misdemeanor or felony too. Simple robbery, felony, up to 7 years imprisoned. Battery on a police officer, misdemeanor, 15 days to 6 months in prison, disturbing the peace, misdemeanors, up to 90 days in prison, resisting arrest, misdemeanor, up to 6 months in prison. Update. I heard from the DA's office yesterday, didn't have time to update due to work, but here we go. The ADA asked if I would drop the simple robbery charge to a misdemeanor theft, which is up to 6 months in jail. Figuring this lady has no previous record, I agreed to it. They also dropped the disturbing the peace charge and the misdemeanor battery of a police officer charge due to the injuries. Can't really object, but hey, it is what it is. So now she's facing up to a year in jail. ADA says that if she pleads guilty to the charges, she'll get a plea deal where she'll have to spend a month in jail and the remainder on inactive probation, which just means she doesn't have to do weekly or monthly check-ins with a parole officer. If she doesn't plead guilty and it goes to trial, she'll have to serve the whole sentence. My money's on her taking the plea deal. Why am I not surprised that Karen asked where your manager was? And our last short story. I made a typo. A while back, my boss's wife had a baby, and naturally, my boss took some time off. While he was gone, his boss supervised our little group. Boss's boss is, let's be charitable, not well liked. As part of closing the register, we're supposed to count the number of each denomination of bill that's being deposited, e.g., $100 times 3, $20 times 6, etc., etc. Well, one of these days I made a typo and entered 10 of some denomination when I actually dropped it. Fat fingers, it happens. It was my fault and my mistake, no denying it. However, boss's boss decided this was the hill on which she would plant her flag. She came into the shop, all kinds of bluster, wanting to know what happened. I asked the obvious questions. Was my drop actually short what it should have been? No. Was there actually anything to suggest that money was unaccounted for? No. Well, says I, it seems like this was just a typo. Sorry about that. This answer was not acceptable to her. She launches into a long lecture about how important it is to track money accurately. I agree with her and reiterate that this seems like a typo, not an accounting error. I need you to write a letter, she says, explaining what went wrong here to include in your employment record. I'm a bit surprised about this, but since I mostly want her to get out of my shop, I agree and tell her that such a letter will be on her desk by the end of the day. Once I complete my drop, being especially sure to avoid said fat finger-related mishaps, sit down at the computer, I download the fancy company letterhead to write my letter. It reads as follows. Date. Dear boss's boss, I made a typo. Very respectfully, OP. I never heard anything else about it and haven't the slightest idea if that letter's in my record or not. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.